Hugh Dancy, you're currently on the Hulu show The Path, which is about to air its season finale, I believe, coming up this week. The show is really, really good, really fascinating. What about that script when you first got it really popped out to you? What was really fascinating about it to you?
Well, actually, I mean, the experience for me was not immediate. And I think the reason for that is that it was literally about a week and a half after Hannibal was cancelled that I got this script. I mean, probably no coincidence, but I was still kind of dealing with that one thing and not particularly expecting to jump back into something else so quickly. So it took me a while to come around to it. When I did, I was kind of not daunted, but I suppose cautious about the idea of playing somebody that could even be described as a cult leader, because there's so many, in my mind, there's so many bad versions of that. You know, there's so many kind of mustache twirling. I mean, cult leader has already become code for a terrible person in our culture. So I was hesitant for that reason as well. And what kind of won me round really was the slow realization that the writers on this show were, beyond all of that, completely committed to the faith of this guy and of all the characters. I mean, specifically their belief system, which is a fictional one, but also the need for faith that they all have and the seriousness with which they take that. And that was really the starting place for the show and for the character as well. That's what ultimately made me very interested in it.
Did you know, I've always found the subject of cults, or what could be considered cults, and the strategy and mindset behind that to be very fascinating. Did you know much about cults going into this, or anything about how America has dealt with cults in the past?
I suppose I knew a little bit. I mean, I was in a cult movie of sorts, which was Martha, Marcy, May, Marlene. That was, you know, in not a very, very different kind of situation, but still what you would bracket as cult. The very first job I ever had as an actor was playing a kind of acolyte to a fictionalized English Manson-esque character. So I remember reading Helter Skelter. But actually the position I've kind of come to through this show and thinking about this character, and of course they're all very, very defensive about the idea that they might be in a cult, because nobody thinks that they're in a cult. And my position now really is that I don't see any distinction between one person's cult and another person's religion. There's clear opportunity for abuse and delusion in any belief system, ranging from the tiniest little niche to any world religion. I mean, there's dark and light in all of them, in different pockets, and all of them, more importantly, perhaps started as little niche movements, inspired by one person usually, and the ones that still exist manage to get past that phase, and most of them don't. So the word cult stopped being very useful to me.
What I really like about this character is that we kind of see him kind of understand, he is a true believer, but he's also understanding the faults within the movement, what's the word I'm looking for? Human, the humanity within the movement, and how he can take advantage of that. What's it like trying to get into that mindset of this person as you play this? Because it's a very cunning one. It's very interesting, but it's also very frightening.
Yeah, I think he has the potential to be quite a frightening person. He's also, I mean, actually, I always felt quite bad for him. I think he's in a very difficult situation because, as you say, he is a true believer. Almost all his life has been a true believer, fervent believer. And he's discovered not exactly a fault line in the religion, but something that throws some certain elements of his belief into question. And at exactly that same moment, he's faced with having to step up and become the leader of the thing, which he really never wanted to be. He never imagined being. So he's shouldering that burden entirely on his own. So my understanding of him, my basic understanding of him, was that he's in a place of extreme loneliness. I also think that he is by nature, by character, quite a lonely person who's built this situation for himself. He's a workaholic, basically, except within a cult. And he's built this whole world up in which he doesn't have to make proper connection, except, I suppose, with a couple of people. And then, what happens is that as he works, he's a very kind of proactive person. He doesn't really sit around and think things through too much. I don't mean to say that he's dumb. I just mean that he's somebody who acts. As he does that, as he's taking all these things on, these burdens, it starts to coalesce with another part of him, which is really this kind of powerful ambition, which up to that point has never really been given full expression. And that's when things start to get a bit problematic for him.
You do have two very high-profile co-stars in this, Aaron Paul and Michelle Monaghan, who are I imagine are great partners to work with as an actor. But actually, some of my favorite scenes so far from this first season have two other people in it, and that's Brian Stokes-Mitchell and Adrian Lennox. I love the scenes with the three of you. They're fantastic, and it just sort of crackles, along with the words that are being given in the script. I'm curious as to what it's like, being, filming a scene with them where there is such tension in that script. What's that like?
Well, I think one reason for that is that they are two people who, within the movement, I mean, there's I suppose, spoiler alert here for anybody who hasn't seen the show at all, to a degree. They are, all three of them, at the very upper level, the 10th rung of this religion. And our leader, so kind of potted version of the show, our leader, Steve Myers, Dr. Myers, had promised 13 rungs, and essentially after having provided 10, he's now apparently essentially out of the picture. So what's happened to this prophecy of 13 rungs? But as 10R individuals, people who've reached the 10th rung, we are the only people who are privy to the fact that there's this problem, that Steve is ill. And that means that in those scenes, basically Cal is, unlike when I'm acting with Aaron or with Michelle, I'm with those two characters, he's able to speak much more frankly and with a kind of much more passion and basically give expression to all this stuff he's kind of packed in, and is keeping to himself. So I think that's one reason why, and also because they're both fantastic actors.
So I know we've talked about the path. The path is what you got on currently, but I'm pretty sure that the Gold Derby users would storm my castle with pitchforks and torches if I didn't bring up Hannibal, which is a big favorite of a lot of the people here at Gold Derby, including a lot of the people who run the site, who work for the site, including myself. Our founder, Tom O'Neill, loved this show. I hate that I have to use it in the past tense. What was that experience like, filming something that's a known commodity, with the character of Hannibal Lecter and the universe that was built within the Thomas Harris novels, and expanding on that and doing your own sort of take on it? What was that experience like?
Well, it so quickly became something else. I don't mean to say, I think there was great loyalty from Brian and from everybody else involved to the source material, to Thomas Harris, but nonetheless it took on this spirit of its own, which was the result of everybody involved, primarily Brian and his great gifts, but then of course, beyond that, all all the rest of us. There was never, for me, I mean, maybe more for Mads, I don't know, but there was never a sense of, oh my God, how do you live up to previous performances or anything like that. It was more the wealth of material, and a lot of which, as you know, I would think, makes its way directly to the screen. I mean, lines from Thomas Harris that Brian would put into the scripts and then basically kind of force us to say, and not all of them lend themselves to naturalistic dialogue. And part of the beauty of it actually was that, for 3 seasons, I got to sit or stand, once he was in his cell, opposite Mads, and just to have these long scenes, kind of little tennis matches back to back with this kind of, not preposterous, but heightened, poetic, beautiful dialogue that would never normally be put into the mouth of a character on television, and that I got to do that with Mads. So I'm not really answering your question. I'm just offering my own kind of little eulogy.
Oh no, it's anything to remember what it was like to watch that show, because watching it certainly was an experience, because it was so beautifully filmed, and the music and just everything about it was an amazing collection, an amazing experience.
It was honestly the same for me, and I can only speak for myself, but I'm 100% confident that almost everybody else involved would say the same thing. It was really, it had this otherworldly feeling to it, and of course there's hard work involved and all the usual stuff. We never knew if we were going to get to continue, and obviously I think Brian, the fact that the thing was about death anyway, in some way assisted that, and clearly the way he ended each season, he bore that in mind. But I strangely, the one year that I felt like, I think we're going to get to expand this and take this forward, was at the end of the 3rd year. So that goes to show, I suppose, that you can never be too confident. That said, I think that where we left off clearly leaves us, not so clearly because we went off a cliff, but in fact, from the conversations that I've had with Brian, and I've said this before, and so has he, there's actually quite a clear game plan for how the thing could re-coalesce, if that's a word, a few years down the line, both a few years in kind of screen time and in actual time, maybe in a different format or whatever. So for me personally, I hope that that's the case. I know a lot of people hope that be the case, but it's true for me as well on a personal level. I would love that.
So there is this sort of open possibility that there still could be further continuation of the story of Will Graham and Hannibal Lecter.
But clearly those two, you have to do far more to those two people than stab them multiple times and throw them off a cliff.
Same to Raul, and by the way, same for Raul Esparza as well.
Yeah, that's right. No, he'd be there. He's probably down there scuba diving into some kind of, kind of iron lung. I think that, it's part of it is a matter of getting everybody, figuring out, getting somebody to pay for it, getting everybody back. Brian is obviously a very busy man right now, and we're all busy. And then it's a matter of rights as well. So that you continue in the Thomas Harris universe, there's the issue of getting the rights to Silence of the Lambs and so on and so forth. So there's lots of hoops to jump through, but the will is there for sure.
And Hannibal definitely accrued a very passionate fan base, and I know that with all sorts of things that have very passionate fan bases, they can manifest themselves in endearing ways, but also very strange ways. Did you ever encounter any manifestation of that in more the strange category?
I think there's a whole universe of fan art, and I'm sure you know what I mean by shipping, that I basically did not maybe expose myself to is not quite the right phrase, but kind of kept out of, because at times that can be a little disturbing. But I'm being glib, because 99% of the time, really, the response, just in terms of people's enthusiasm, but also in terms of the actual, the work that people made, the art that people made in their own creative response to the show, was really incredible. Not something I've ever experienced before. And I found it to be thrilling and very, very rewarding. And I mean, I think we were very, very cognizant of that all the way through. You always worry a little bit when you see somebody that's got a tattoo of something you're involved in. You think, really? But look, it will always be dear and important to me. So I'm glad that it was shared.
And so last line of question I wanted to ask is, so we are an awards website. And you've done quite a lot of television, including you were nominated for an Emmy back in 2006 for your role as Earl of Essex and Elizabeth I. And while you didn't prevail, one of your co-stars did, Jeremy Irons. What's that experience like, being up against someone else from the same project?
I mean, actually fine, but not least because almost across the board, that show was nominated for so many things. I mean, Helen was nominated and Tom Hooper was nominated and the show was nominated. So actually the worst thing would have not to been on that list. It's also true that Jeremy took me aside beforehand and said, now you must remember that if you win this, you must thank me and I shall do the same. And I hadn't even thought about that. Oh yeah, absolutely. Of course, Jeremy. And then he didn't. But it was, it was a great evening because it was, as with most things, that show was made without anticipating that it would end up so celebrated or so successful. So it was a good thing.
And I was curious, have they made a determination, because you and Aaron Paul are very much, I think your characters are very front and center in the show. Is there been discussion about whether for this year's Emmys, whether you would go for the lead category or the supporting category for the path? I
think that I haven't had that official conversation with anybody. My guess and my understanding is that we'd both be up for lead, because I don't know that you could really swing it any other way. I mean, it's, there are 3 leads in the show, so it's not a classic situation in which you've got one male and one female lead. But I don't know that you could really describe either of us as supporting. So I don't know. Look, I'm sure those conversations happen, and thankfully they're not conversations that I have to be part of or privy to.
For all I know, they might have actually, that might have been decided, and I'll get some people yelling at me in the comments section about this, going, saying, I work for this website, how stupid can I be? And apparently the answer is at least that much. So the
opportunity to, show that they know a lot.
Yeah, exactly. It's all this website really exists for, basically. The one other thing I wanted to ask was, so if you were to be nominated for an actual series as opposed to a movie like you were nominated for, you would have to submit an episode that would serve as sort of like what you're being, of what you think is the best example of your performance that you've given throughout the season. Do you have like an episode that you feel or maybe one or two that you feel then the range of performance that you've given this season?
That's difficult. I guess I would probably say, I mean, I loved on a personal level, I loved the 3rd episode of the series because I got to work with Kathleen Turner, who, in terms of guest stars and being rewarded, I think should absolutely be part of that conversation, because she was fantastic. And that's a good day when somebody says, oh, Kathleen's going to play your mum. Great. But it was probably not representative of the series. The performance as a whole, because it was this odd little road trip. On the other hand, you got to learn a lot about who he was, and that was very, very helpful for me going forwards. Episode 8, when everything goes off the rails, and he's out on the road, dead drunk, I mean, I'm sure that a lot of people haven't seen it, so I won't give the whole thing away. But there was that. I think they very consciously. Well, I know they, meaning Jessica Goldberg, the showrunner, very consciously tried to ramp things up in that episode to give it the momentum to go through to the end of the season. And I got some great stuff to do. I was very proud of that episode. Episode 9, you get to see him at his most he's really pulling things together, and for a while at least everything's going his way. And I suppose, I'm not going to pick one because I haven't had to think about it, but all those 3 were fun.
Well, it's something that I think if people haven't been watching, they definitely need to watch that. And I love that Hulu's been doing it week by week, which makes it linger more than other online shows where they just do a complete episode dump. And
I think also it gives people the opportunity to join, to become part of that experience. So if you come to it 8 weeks in, as many people would, because there's so much that they can binge the first bit and then be part of the final or whatever it might be.
Yeah, they get to have that shared experience of, we all find out what happens on, it may be with a variable of a couple hours, but we all get that shared experience, which I think is something that's been lacking in, as great as a lot of these streaming shows are. We're missing that experience, and I miss that sometimes.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. So I thank you so much. And for our viewers out there, we had a little bit of technical trouble getting this together. I will take all the blame for that. We can't have any bad things being reflected on you, Hugh. So thank you again. Thank you so much for joining us. And we wish you all the best this award season.
Thank you very much. Thank you.